"No one had ever kissed me," said the young Apache, and the rancher leaned in. The air was dry, and the wind whispered gently through the scattered sagebrush and cacti. In this quiet, rugged land lived a young Apache boy named Tay. He had grown up surrounded by the beauty and harshness of the desert, learning to move silently across the sandy plains and to listen to the stories carried by the wind. Life for Tay was simple, yet it was filled with hard work, tradition, and a deep sense of belonging. From a very young age, Tay had helped his family care for their small herd of goats and horses. Each day began before the sun fully rose, with the smell of burning sage lingering in the air as his mother prepared the morning meal. Tay would help gather firewood, water the animals, and run small errands for his parents. Even though he was shy and often kept to himself, he had a sharp mind and an eager heart. He loved learning about the plants, the animals, and the patterns of the desert sky. Every detail fascinated him. The way the hawks circled above, the tracks of coyotes in the sand, and the sudden blooming of desert flowers all told stories that Tay cherished deeply. Despite the close connection he felt with his family and the land, Tay often felt a quiet loneliness. The reservation was small, and while everyone knew each other, he sometimes wished he could experience something different, something beyond the horizon that stretched endlessly in front of him. At night, when the stars twinkled like distant fires, he would sit outside his small home and imagine what life might be like in a place where the sky was full of bustling towns, carriages, or people he had never met. It was a longing he could not fully explain, a curiosity about the world that went beyond the stories of elders and the traditions he knew so well. One day, a new figure appeared near the edges of the reservation. A rancher named Samuel had come to trade supplies. He was a man in his early 40s, tall and broad-shouldered, with a calm presence that seemed to put everyone at ease. Samuel was a widower who lived on a nearby ranch, a place filled with open fields, fences, and the distant hum of cattle. He was kind and patient, though the lines on his face showed that he had lived through both joy and hardship. Tay first noticed Samuel from a distance. He was cautious but curious, watching the man interact politely with the elders, exchanging goods, and speaking with a gentle confidence that Tay had never encountered. There was something about Samuel that drew Tay's attention. Perhaps it was the way he listened carefully, or the small, thoughtful gestures he made when helping others. Tay felt a stirring inside him, a sense that this man could offer stories and experiences unlike anything he had ever known. Over the weeks, Samuel became a regular visitor. He would bring flour, sugar, and small trinkets, exchanging them for crafts, eggs, and handmade goods from the tribe. Slowly, Tay began to approach him. At first, he would only stand at the edge of the trading area, watching as Samuel spoke kindly to the elders and other children. Samuel noticed Tay's quiet observation and, with gentle encouragement, invited him closer. He asked simple questions about the land, the animals, and the tribe's traditions. Tay, though shy, found himself speaking more than he ever had with anyone outside his family. Samuel listened without judgment, asking questions that made Tay feel that his thoughts and experiences truly mattered. Their friendship grew slowly, like a small plant sprouting in the desert soil. Samuel would teach Tay little skills from the ranch, showing him how to saddle a horse properly, how to mend fences, and how to track animals across the land. Tay absorbed everything with eagerness, his eyes wide with fascination. In return, Tay shared his knowledge of the desert, the plants that healed, the patterns of the stars, and the stories passed down by the elders. Each evening, they would sit by a small fire, talking quietly as the sky darkened and the stars blinked into existence. These conversations became the highlight of Tay's days, moments where he felt truly seen and understood. Despite the differences in their worlds, Tay and Samuel found common ground in their curiosity and respect for life. Tay began to trust Samuel in a way he had never trusted anyone outside his family. He felt a warmth in Samuel's presence, a safety that allowed him to speak openly about his dreams and fears. For the first time, he voiced thoughts he had kept to himself for years. He spoke about his longing to see the mountains beyond the desert, to meet people unlike himself, and to experience the unknown. Samuel listened patiently, encouraging him gently without pushing too hard. He shared stories of his own youth, of mistakes and triumphs, and of the lessons learned from hardship. One evening, as the sky turned shades of deep orange and violet, Tay and Samuel were sitting quietly on a small hill overlooking the desert. The wind carried the faint scent of sage, and the distant howl of a coyote echoed across the plains. Tay, feeling a mix of nervousness and honesty, finally spoke the words he had kept inside for so long. His voice was soft, barely above the whisper of the wind, but filled with a sincerity that Samuel could not ignore. "No one has ever kissed me," Tay admitted, his eyes fixed on the horizon. Samuel was taken aback for a moment, surprised by the vulnerability in Tay's words. But he quickly recognized the trust it took for the boy to say this aloud. He did not respond with judgment or awkwardness. Instead, he offered a gentle smile, acknowledging the courage it had taken for Tay to speak. That moment was significant, not for what happened next, but for the bond it revealed. It was a testament to the trust and connection they had built, a rare understanding between two people from very different worlds. From that day forward, Tay felt a new sense of closeness to Samuel. The simple act of sharing his secret, his fear, and his curiosity created a bridge between them. Samuel's presence became a source of comfort and learning, and Tay's heart grew with both admiration and a budding understanding of human connection. The days continued with their usual routines, helping with the animals, trading goods, and exploring the desert. But now there was a quiet depth to their friendship, an unspoken promise of care and respect. As the sun set each day, painting the sky with colors that seemed almost unreal, Tay would reflect on the lessons of the desert and the friendship that had entered his life. He began to understand that the world was larger than the reservation, filled with people who could offer kindness, guidance, and experiences he had never imagined. And in this vast, sun-soaked land, Tay realized that moments of trust, understanding, and connection were treasures as rare and beautiful as the desert flowers that bloomed after the rain. The young Apache boy had taken his first step toward a life filled with discovery, courage, and human connection, all through the simple act of speaking his truth to someone who truly listened. And in that desert, under the endless sky, a friendship had begun, one that would change Tay's life in ways he could not yet fully understand. Days turned into weeks, and the friendship between Tay and Samuel grew stronger. Each morning, the desert awoke with its usual golden light, and Tay would rise early, eager for the hours he would spend with Samuel. The boy had started to look forward to the rancher's visits more than anything else in his day. There was something comforting about Samuel's presence, a calm that seemed to settle the constant curiosity and restlessness that had long lived in Tay's heart. Samuel, too, had come to enjoy Tay's company. He saw in the boy a kind of openness and eagerness to learn that reminded him of himself when he was young. Samuel's days on the ranch were filled with work and routine, yet he found that visiting the reservation brought him a sense of purpose he had not felt in years. Tay's curiosity and respect for life were contagious, and Samuel could not help but smile as he watched the boy's face light up whenever he learned something new. Their days were often spent outdoors. Samuel taught Tay how to ride horses properly, guiding his small hands as he adjusted the reins, showing him the right way to balance, and explaining how to read the movement of the animals. Tay listened intently, absorbing every word, his small heart beating fast with excitement and pride whenever he managed a trick or a skill correctly. Riding with Samuel became one of his favorite activities, a time when he felt both freedom and safety at the same time. The desert stretched endlessly around them, and Tay felt as if he could ride forever without ever growing tired, carried forward by the gentle voice of his friend. In return, Tay shared his own knowledge of the land. He pointed out the plants used for medicine, explaining which could heal cuts and which could calm fevers. He showed Samuel how to track the movements of animals by observing the subtle marks in the sand or the broken twigs in the brush. Samuel listened with admiration, recognizing the depth of Tay's connection with the desert, a knowledge that he himself could never fully master. In these moments, they became not just friends, but teachers and students to each other, each learning from the other's world. Beyond the skills, their conversations became a bridge between two very different lives. One evening, as the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the desert, Tay asked Samuel about the world beyond the mountains he could just see in the distance. Samuel told stories of bustling towns, of fields of golden wheat, of people who lived in houses that reached toward the sky. He spoke of rivers filled with fish, forests that were so dense that sunlight barely touched the ground, and animals that Tay had never imagined existed. The stories were magical to the boy, and he hung on every word, imagining a world beyond the reservation where possibilities seemed endless. Tay, in turn, shared stories of his own life and his people. He spoke of the traditions of his tribe, the songs sung around fires at night, and the ceremonies that marked the changing seasons. He told Samuel about the elders' teachings, the stories of ancestors, and the lessons that life in the desert had taught him. Samuel listened with genuine interest, never interrupting, never rushing. The boy felt that he could speak freely, that his words mattered, and that someone truly understood him. As their bond deepened, Tay began to reveal parts of himself he had never shared with anyone. One afternoon, while sitting under the shade of a solitary mesquite tree, he spoke quietly, almost as if testing the sound of his own voice. "I sometimes feel like I will never know what it is to be like other people," he admitted, his eyes tracing the horizon. "I have never felt the way others do. I have never been close to anyone outside my family in this way." Samuel looked at him with gentle understanding. He knew that the boy's words were filled with both curiosity and a quiet pain, a longing for experiences that had always been just out of reach. He placed a reassuring hand on Tay's shoulder, not to impose, but to offer comfort. "You are learning in your own time," Samuel said softly. "There is no hurry. Life will give you experiences when you are ready, and I will be here to help you understand them if you want." Tay felt a warmth spread through him at Samuel's words. It was the first time he had ever felt that someone could see him for who he truly was, without judgment or expectation. He began to trust not just Samuel's guidance, but his presence itself. There was a sense of safety, a feeling that he could explore the parts of himself he had always kept hidden. And slowly, he began to open up even more, sharing small thoughts, jokes, and dreams that he had never spoken aloud. One evening, after a long day of riding and learning, Tay and Samuel sat quietly by a small fire. The desert had cooled, and the sky was dotted with stars that seemed brighter than anywhere else. The boy's voice was soft, almost hesitant but full of honesty. "Samuel, do you think it is strange that I have never been kissed?" Samuel paused, sensing the vulnerability in the question. He thought carefully before responding, understanding that the boy's question was not just about a kiss. It was about trust, intimacy, and the desire to feel close to another human being. He met Tay's gaze and spoke with patience. "It is not strange at all," he said. "Everyone experiences things in their own time. What matters is that you are honest with yourself and with the people you trust." Tay nodded, feeling a mixture of relief and curiosity. He realized that he could trust Samuel with thoughts and feelings he had never shared with anyone else. It was a new and exciting sensation, one that made his heart beat a little faster, and his mind fill with questions about life, love, and human connection. In the days that followed, Tay's trust in Samuel grew even stronger. He began to share more of his daily experiences, his fears, and his dreams. Samuel continued to teach him practical skills, but also offered guidance about life, patience, and understanding. He encouraged Tay to observe the world carefully, to think deeply about his actions, and to consider the feelings of others. The lessons went beyond horseback riding or tracking animals. They were lessons about empathy, courage, and the value of meaningful relationships. As their friendship blossomed, the people around them began to notice. Some elders watched with quiet curiosity, seeing the unusual bond between the boy and the rancher. Samuel's interactions were always respectful, careful not to impose upon the tribe's traditions or authority. Tay's family, too, saw the positive influence Samuel had on him. They noticed how Tay was growing in confidence, how he smiled more freely, and how his eyes shone with curiosity and excitement. One afternoon, while they were repairing a fence on the outskirts of the reservation, Tay paused to look at Samuel. His voice was soft but filled with honesty. "I feel like I have learned so much from you," he said. "Not just about riding or the land, but about how to trust, how to care, and how to see the world differently." Samuel smiled, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction and connection. "And I have learned from you as well," he replied. "You remind me to look at life with fresh eyes, to notice the beauty in small things, and to value every moment. We can learn from each other, Tay, no matter how different our worlds are." The desert around them seemed to grow quieter as the sun began to set. Shadows stretched across the sand, and the colors of the sky deepened into shades of orange, pink, and purple. Tay felt a sense of contentment he had never known before. The friendship he shared with Samuel had become a source of comfort, excitement, and discovery. It was a connection that went beyond words, beyond age, and beyond experience. It was about trust, care, and the joy of sharing life with someone who truly understood. As night fell and the stars appeared once again, Tay reflected on how much his life had changed in such a short time. The boy who had once felt isolated and curious about the unknown now had a guide, a mentor, and a friend. He had found someone who valued his thoughts, listened to his fears, and encouraged his dreams. And most importantly, he had found someone with whom he could share even the most private parts of himself, his longing, his curiosity, and his heart. It was in these quiet, shared moments that Tay began to understand the depth of human connection. Life, he realized, was not just about survival or knowledge. It was about trust, empathy, and the bonds we form with others. And with Samuel by his side, the world seemed not just larger, but filled with possibilities he had never imagined. The friendship they shared continued to grow, becoming a foundation upon which Tay could explore the world, his own feelings, and the lessons of life. And in the quiet desert under the endless sky, the boy began to understand that true connection was rare, precious, and transformative, a gift that could change the course of his life forever. The days grew warmer as the sun climbed higher in the Arizona sky, and the desert seemed to glow with an intense golden light. Tay and Samuel continued their daily routines, their bond growing stronger with every shared moment. Riding horses, tending to the small herds, repairing fences, and walking across the dusty plains had become more than chores. They were opportunities for learning, understanding, and sharing life together. The boy's admiration for Samuel deepened with each passing day, while Samuel's care for Tay grew steadily, tempered by patience and understanding. It was during one quiet afternoon that the air seemed to carry a certain stillness, as if the desert itself was holding its breath. They had spent the morning following the tracks of a small herd of deer, observing the delicate marks they left in the sand. Samuel had shown Tay how to notice the slightest disturbances in the soil, how to anticipate the movements of the animals, and how to read the signs left behind by creatures who lived in harmony with the land. Tay had learned quickly, his eyes bright with excitement and pride, but something deeper had begun stirring inside him. As they rested under the shade of a large, old mesquite tree, Tay's thoughts turned inward. He had never felt emotions like these before: curiosity, admiration, and a strange warmth he could not fully name. Sitting beside Samuel, he realized that he trusted him more than anyone else he had ever known. There was a comfort in Samuel's presence, a quiet reassurance that made Tay feel seen in a way that no one else had ever managed. It was a mix of respect, admiration, and a tender longing he did not yet fully understand. Samuel, too, sensed a change in the air. He noticed the way Tay's eyes lingered on him slightly longer, the shy glances, and the moments of hesitation before speaking. Samuel understood that the boy was experiencing new emotions, emotions that were natural, innocent, and part of growing up. He also understood that his role was to guide Tay gently, offering comfort and trust without forcing anything, respecting the boy's pace and feelings. That evening, after the sun had begun its slow descent, painting the sky in shades of orange, pink, and violet, Tay spoke softly. He had been quiet for some time, staring at the horizon where the desert met the sky, and then he turned to Samuel with a small, hesitant voice. "Samuel, I want to understand more about what it means to be close to someone," he admitted. "I've never felt it before. I don't know how." Samuel looked at him carefully, recognizing the vulnerability in Tay's words. He nodded gently, keeping his voice calm and reassuring. "It is natural to feel that way," he said. "Being close to someone is about trust, patience, and understanding. It is not something to rush. It is about respecting yourself and the person you care about." Tay listened intently, absorbing every word. He felt his heart beating faster, a mixture of nervousness and anticipation coursing through him. The boy had never spoken like this before, sharing his thoughts so openly, and the act of doing so made him feel both anxious and brave. He trusted Samuel completely, and that trust was forming a bond that went beyond words. After a long pause, Tay's voice trembled slightly as he spoke again. I, I want to feel what it is like to be close to someone. I trust you, Samuel. Can you help me understand?" His words were soft, but they carried the weight of sincerity and courage. Samuel took a deep breath. He understood that Tay's request was not casual. It was an expression of trust, of innocence, and a desire for connection. He also understood the responsibility he held in that moment. Samuel had spent years learning about patience, compassion, and the delicate nature of human relationships. He knew that any action he took must honor Tay's trust and maintain the safety and respect that had always defined their bond. Gently, Samuel placed a hand on Tay's shoulder, giving him a reassuring squeeze. "Tay," he said softly, "to feel close to someone you must first feel safe. You have trusted me and I will respect that trust. Close moments are about comfort, care, and understanding." Tay nodded, feeling both relief and anticipation. He trusted Samuel completely, and he felt ready to experience this new form of connection. The desert around them seemed quieter, as if it were watching and respecting the moment. The soft rustle of leaves in the mesquite tree and the distant calls of birds created a serene backdrop for the trust and vulnerability shared between them. Samuel leaned in slowly, giving Tay space to respond, to move if he felt uncomfortable. His actions were careful, measured, and full of respect. When their faces were close, Tay felt a mixture of nervousness and wonder. His chest beat rapidly, not from fear, but from the overwhelming sense of trust, safety, and curiosity. Samuel's eyes met his with warmth and reassurance, silently telling Tay that he was safe, that he was valued, and that this moment was about connection, not anything else. The first kiss happened gently, tenderly, a small, careful gesture that carried the weight of trust rather than passion. It was a moment of innocence, an expression of care and closeness that Tay had never experienced before. He felt a strange warmth spread through him, a combination of surprise, joy, and comfort. It was a sensation that was both new and profound, leaving him feeling lighter, braver, and more connected than ever before. When it was over, Tay stepped back slightly, his cheeks flushed and his eyes wide. He looked at Samuel with a mixture of awe and gratitude. I didn't know it could feel like this," he whispered. "It's beautiful." Samuel smiled gently, keeping his voice calm and kind. "That is because it comes from trust, Tay," he said. "It is a gift when someone allows you to be close to them, and it is precious because it is based on understanding and care." Tay nodded, feeling a sense of peace he had never known before. The experience had opened a door in his heart, a door to trust, connection, and the understanding that moments of intimacy could be gentle, kind, and safe. He realized that closeness was not just about physical gestures. It was about the willingness to share yourself, to be vulnerable, and to allow someone else to see your true feelings. The evening continued with a quiet serenity. They stayed under the mesquite tree, watching the sky darken and the first stars appear. The desert seemed alive with a soft, protective energy, as if it understood the importance of the bond that had just been deepened. Tay felt a mixture of excitement and calm, a rare combination that made him feel fully alive. He knew that this moment would remain with him forever, a memory of trust, care, and the beginning of a deeper understanding of human connection. Over the next few days, their friendship shifted subtly. There was a new layer of understanding, a quiet acknowledgement of the bond they shared. Tay felt braver, more willing to speak openly about his thoughts and feelings. He also felt a sense of responsibility, to honor Samuel's trust, to act with care, and to continue growing as a person. Samuel noticed the change as well. The boy seemed more confident, more expressive, and more curious about the world around him. He was learning not only about skills and traditions, but also about the emotions that make life rich and meaningful. They continued their lessons in riding, tracking, and caring for the land, but now there was an added depth to every interaction. Every conversation, every shared silence, and every smile carried a sense of mutual respect and understanding. Samuel remained patient, never rushing Tay, always offering guidance with kindness. And Tay, in turn, learned to value the quiet moments, to observe the subtle beauty in the world, and to cherish the bonds that made life meaningful. Evenings were spent talking under the stars, sharing stories and reflections. Tay spoke more openly about his dreams of seeing the mountains, the forests, and the rivers he had heard about in Samuel's stories. Samuel listened and encouraged him, offering wisdom about patience, courage, and the importance of understanding one's own heart. Tay began to see that life was not just about what you did, but how you approached the world, with trust, care, and awareness of the connections that make life meaningful. The first kiss had not changed everything, but it had opened a door. It had shown Tay that trust, vulnerability, and care could create moments of profound connection. It had also reinforced the importance of respecting others, of approaching relationships with patience and empathy, and of valuing the emotional growth that comes from shared experiences. As the desert nights grew cooler, Tay lay in his small home, thinking about the events of the past few weeks. He felt a sense of gratitude, wonder, and hope. Life had become richer, filled with possibilities he had never imagined. He realized that the bond he shared with Samuel was rare and precious, and he vowed to honor it through his actions, his learning, and his growth. And so, the young Apache boy continued to navigate his world with a newfound courage. The trust and connection he had experienced would guide him, not only in his friendship with Samuel, but in all the relationships and challenges that lay ahead. The desert remained vast and unchanging, yet Tay saw it differently now, with hope, curiosity, and a deeper understanding of the beauty of human connection. The weeks that followed were full of routine, learning, and quiet joy. Tay and Samuel continued their days exploring the desert, caring for animals, and sharing stories by the fire as night fell. Their friendship had grown deeper, and there was a quiet understanding between them that did not need words. However, as the bond between the boy and the rancher strengthened, the world around them began to notice, and not all attention was kind. At first, the elders of the reservation observed silently. They were aware of Samuel's frequent visits and the time he spent with Tay, and though they trusted him, they could not ignore the unusual closeness between the boy and the rancher. Some elders exchanged concerned glances, quietly questioning whether such a bond might be misunderstood by others or whether it might disrupt the traditions they had long upheld. They respected Samuel, but the situation challenged their sense of what was appropriate, and they wondered if guidance or caution was needed. In addition to the elders' quiet attention, some of the neighboring ranchers had begun to gossip. Samuel's presence on the reservation was noticed, and in small towns and isolated homes, people often whispered when they saw someone unfamiliar forming unusual friendships. The world beyond the reservation was not always understanding, and Samuel knew that curiosity could easily turn into judgment. He felt the weight of responsibility, knowing that the bond he had nurtured with Tay might be scrutinized unfairly. For Tay, the growing attention was confusing. He noticed whispers among some of the other children and elders, and while he did not fully understand the implications, he could feel the tension in the air. He wondered if he had done something wrong simply by trusting Samuel, and the fear of judgment began to stir within him. At the same time, he did not want to lose the closeness that had become so important to him. His heart was torn between the comfort he felt with Samuel and the uncertainty of how others might perceive their friendship. Samuel recognized the change in Tay's demeanor immediately. The boy's laughter was quieter, his glances were more cautious, and he sometimes hesitated before speaking openly. Samuel knew that he needed to reassure Tay without making him feel embarrassed or ashamed. One afternoon, as they repaired a fence together, Samuel spoke gently. "Tay," he said, "people may not always understand what is special between us, but that does not make it wrong. What matters is that we treat each other with respect and care." Tay listened, though the anxiety in his heart did not disappear completely. "But what if they think it is strange?" he asked quietly, his voice barely above the sound of the wind through the sagebrush. Samuel smiled kindly. "Then we show them through our actions. Respect, honesty, and kindness are stronger than gossip or misunderstanding. People will always have their opinions, but they cannot take away the trust we share or the lessons we learn from each other." Despite Samuel's reassurances, Tay could not help but feel the weight of others' opinions. There were moments when he wondered if his friendship with Samuel would be interrupted or criticized, and these thoughts made him hesitant. Yet, each time he looked at Samuel, he remembered the trust and care that had been shared, and he found the courage to continue. He realized that facing challenges and standing by what was right required bravery, and that true connection was worth protecting. The tension reached a turning point one afternoon when a group of neighboring ranchers arrived near the reservation. They had heard rumors about Samuel and the boy and were curious, perhaps suspicious. Samuel greeted them politely, explaining that he was visiting as a friend and teacher, sharing skills and stories with Tay. The ranchers were cautious, asking questions that seemed harmless on the surface but carried a subtle judgment. Samuel answered calmly, without anger, showing patience and respect even when the questions grew probing. Tay watched from a distance, his heart pounding. He felt a mixture of fear and pride, fear of what might happen if the situation escalated, and pride in Samuel's composure and wisdom. He realized that being brave did not mean being unafraid. It meant facing uncertainty while staying true to one's values. He learned that courage was about integrity, about protecting the bonds that mattered, even when others might not understand. Later that evening, as the desert sky turned pink and gold with the setting sun, Tay and Samuel sat quietly by their usual fire. The day had been exhausting, filled with questions, whispers, and moments of tension. Yet in the calm of the evening, Tay felt a renewed sense of trust. He spoke softly, almost to himself, but Samuel listened attentively. "I was afraid today," Tay admitted, "but I also saw how patient and strong you were. You didn't get angry or upset. You just stayed calm and kind." Samuel nodded, placing a gentle hand on Tay's shoulder. "That is the way to face challenges," he said. "Anger or fear can make situations worse. Patience, honesty, and understanding are what truly guide us through difficult times. You have learned well, Tay, and you are becoming stronger every day, not just in skill but in heart." Tay felt a wave of warmth and pride. He realized that the challenges of the day had taught him more than any lesson in riding or tracking. He had learned about resilience, the importance of trust, and the power of responding to judgment with integrity rather than fear. These lessons were not easy, and they required courage that sometimes frightened him, but he understood now that the strength of his character was being shaped by every experience. Over the following days, Samuel and Tay continued their routines, but the awareness of external scrutiny remained. The whispers did not stop completely, and there were moments when Tay felt self-conscious. Yet he also noticed that some elders and fellow tribe members began to see the value in their friendship. They observed the boy's growth, the skills he had learned, and the confidence he had gained. Slowly, respect began to replace suspicion. The community started to recognize that the bond between Tay and Samuel was positive, nurturing, and based on mutual respect. Tay's parents, who had been quietly watching, were also reassured. They noticed the boy's transformation, his increased confidence, his joy in learning, and the way he approached life with curiosity and thoughtfulness. They understood that Samuel's guidance had given Tay not just knowledge, but also the courage to navigate challenges and the understanding that trust and care were valuable lessons in life. One evening, after a long day of work, Tay reflected on everything he had experienced. The desert was calm, and the stars shone brightly above, each one like a small beacon of hope. He realized that life was full of challenges, but it was also full of opportunities to grow, to learn, and to strengthen the bonds that mattered. He understood that trust, courage, and integrity were the qualities that would guide him through difficulties, and that these qualities were more valuable than avoiding fear or seeking approval from others. Samuel, sitting beside him, noticed the thoughtful expression on Tay's face. "You are learning, Tay," he said softly. "Life will not always be easy, and people may not always understand you. But if you face the world with honesty, respect, and kindness, you will always find your way. Challenges are part of growth. They show us who we are and who we can become." Tay nodded, feeling the truth in Samuel's words. He realized that the events of the past weeks, the whispers, the judgment, and the fear, had taught him lessons far deeper than any skill or story. They had shown him the value of patience, the strength of trust, and the importance of standing by what he believed was right. He felt proud, not only of himself but of the bond he shared with Samuel, a bond that had been tested and had grown stronger because of the challenges they had faced. The desert stretched endlessly around them, a reminder of the vastness of the world and the many experiences that lay ahead. Tay understood that he could face difficulties and still find joy, that trust and friendship were worth protecting, and that courage was not the absence of fear, but the willingness to move forward despite it. He knew that the lessons of today would guide him tomorrow, and that the support and guidance of Samuel would continue to shape his growth. In the quiet of that evening, Tay felt a sense of peace and determination. He understood that challenges were not obstacles to avoid, but opportunities to learn, to grow, and to strengthen the bonds that mattered most. He had learned to face fear with courage, judgment with patience, and uncertainty with trust. And as he gazed at the stars, he felt ready to continue his journey, confident in the knowledge that he was not alone, and that the bond he shared with Samuel would help him navigate the world with integrity, compassion, and understanding. The young Apache boy had faced his first real challenges beyond the lessons of skills and stories. He had encountered judgment, fear, and misunderstanding, and he had discovered within himself a courage he did not know he possessed. And in this desert under the endless sky, he learned that true growth came not just from learning to ride a horse or track animals, but from facing the world with trust, empathy, and a steadfast heart. The desert was quiet that morning, with the first light of dawn spilling across the sand and turning the distant mountains a soft shade of gold. Tay woke with a sense of purpose that he had not felt before. Over the past weeks, he had learned many lessons about life, about trust, and about the strength of human connection. Yet he knew that the journey was far from over. There were still challenges to face, lessons to learn, and experiences to embrace. Samuel had arrived at the usual hour, his calm presence bringing a sense of comfort to Tay. Together, they tended to the animals, repaired fences, and explored the edges of the reservation. But there was something different in Tay now. He moved with confidence, his eyes bright with curiosity, and his voice carried the quiet authority of someone who had learned to trust himself. Samuel noticed the change immediately, a quiet smile spreading across his face. The boy was growing, not only in skill but in heart and mind. After finishing their work with the animals, they sat on a small hill overlooking the desert. The wind carried the familiar scent of sage, and the vast expanse of the land stretched endlessly before them. Samuel spoke first, his voice gentle but firm. "Tay, you have grown in many ways," he said. "Not just in the skills I have taught you, but in your courage, your patience, and your understanding of the world. Do you see how far you have come?" Tay nodded thoughtfully, a smile tugging at his lips. "I think I do," he said softly. "I can see it in myself, but I also feel it when I'm with you. You have taught me more than I ever imagined, Samuel. I feel stronger. I feel like I can face the world and understand it in a way I couldn't before." Samuel's eyes glimmered with pride. "And that is only the beginning," he replied. "Life will continue to teach you lessons, some easy, some hard. But the courage you have shown, the trust you have built, and the patience you have learned will guide you. Remember that growth is a journey, not a destination." The boy took a deep breath, feeling the warmth of Samuel's words settle in his heart. He reflected on everything he had experienced: the quiet mornings with the animals, the afternoons of learning and exploration, the shared stories by the fire, and the moments of trust and understanding that had changed his life. Every experience had shaped him, teaching him lessons that went far beyond skills or knowledge. They had taught him about empathy, integrity, and the value of human connection. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, Samuel suggested they explore a part of the desert they had not visited before. Tay agreed eagerly, his curiosity always strong. Together, they walked through the sandy plains, following the subtle paths created by animals and the wind. Along the way, Tay pointed out small plants, tracks, and hidden springs, demonstrating how much he had learned. Samuel watched with quiet admiration, seeing the boy's confidence in every step, in every observation, and in every word he spoke. By midday, they reached a small, rocky outcrop overlooking a valley filled with wildflowers and small streams. The sight was breathtaking, a hidden oasis in the vast desert. Tay's eyes widened with wonder, and for a moment he simply stood there, taking in the beauty of the land. Samuel stood beside him, appreciating the boy's reaction and knowing that this moment would be another important memory in Tay's life. "You see, Tay," Samuel said softly, "the world is full of wonders. Some you will discover slowly, some you will see all at once. But every experience is important, every moment teaches us something. You have learned to see the world, to understand it, and to trust it. That is a gift few people ever truly receive. Tay smiled, feeling the truth in Samuel's words. He realized that the experiences he had shared with Samuel had given him more than knowledge. They had given him confidence, understanding, and the ability to face life with courage. He understood that the bond they shared was a rare and precious thing, one that had shaped him into a stronger, wiser, and more compassionate person. As they sat on the rocks, watching the wind ripple through the grasses and listening to the distant calls of birds, Tay reflected on the challenges they had faced together. The whispers of neighbors, the cautious glances of elders, and his own moments of fear and uncertainty, all of it had been part of the journey. He had learned that challenges were not obstacles to avoid, but opportunities to grow, to understand, and to strengthen the bonds that mattered most. Samuel noticed Tay's thoughtful silence and spoke again. The world will always have challenges, Tay. People may not always understand, situations may seem difficult, and fear will always appear at times. But remember this: courage is not the absence of fear, but the willingness to move forward despite it. Integrity is not the absence of mistakes, but the choice to act with honesty and care. And connection is not measured by what others think, but by the trust and respect we give to those who matter. Tay nodded, absorbing the wisdom in Samuel's words. He realized that these lessons were not just about surviving in the desert or learning skills. They were about becoming a person who could face the world with courage, empathy, and understanding. He felt a sense of gratitude for the guidance Samuel had offered, not just in practical matters, but in shaping the very core of who he was becoming. The days continued in a similar rhythm, filled with work, exploration, and quiet reflection. Tay continued to learn from Samuel, but he also began to take initiative, showing leadership, curiosity, and care in his actions. He helped others on the reservation, shared his knowledge, and applied the lessons he had learned about trust, patience, and courage. Samuel watched with pride as the boy transformed into a young man who could navigate both the practical and emotional challenges of life. One afternoon, as they returned from the fields, Tay paused to look at Samuel. His voice was soft but confident. "Samuel, I think I understand something important now," he said. "Life is not just about learning skills or surviving. It's about understanding people, caring for them, and trusting them. It's about standing by what is right, even when it is hard. And most of all, it's about appreciating the moments we share with those who matter." Samuel smiled warmly, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. "That is a lesson most people take a lifetime to learn," he said. "And you have learned it well, Tay. Remember it always. It will guide you through every step of your journey." As the seasons changed, Tay continued to grow in confidence, skill, and wisdom. The bond he shared with Samuel remained strong, a constant source of support, guidance, and understanding. The whispers and concerns of others faded over time, as people recognized the positive impact of their friendship. Tay's family, the elders, and even neighboring ranchers came to see that their bond was based on respect, learning, and care, rather than anything to be feared or misunderstood. Years later, Tay would look back on these days as some of the most important of his life. The lessons he had learned, the value of trust, the courage to face challenges, the importance of empathy, and the understanding of human connection, would guide him throughout his life. Samuel's presence had been more than mentorship. It had been a gift of guidance, love, and understanding that shaped the very foundation of who he had become. Even as Tay grew into adulthood, he never forgot the quiet mornings, the shared lessons, the moments of laughter and silence, and the gentle guidance that had nurtured his heart. He understood that the experiences he had shared with Samuel had given him the strength to face life with confidence, the ability to connect with others deeply, and the wisdom to navigate challenges with patience and integrity. In the vast desert under the endless sky, Tay learned that life's greatest treasures were not always tangible. They were found in moments of trust, in bonds of understanding, and in the courage to open one's heart to others. Samuel's guidance had shown him that growth was a journey, shaped by every challenge, every lesson, and every shared experience. And so, the young Apache boy, who had once been shy and uncertain, became a young man who understood the world valued connection, and carried within him the lessons of patience, courage, and empathy. The bond he had shared with Samuel remained a guiding light, a reminder that human connection, trust, and understanding were among life's most precious gifts. The desert continued to stretch endlessly around him, but Tay saw it differently now. It was not just a place of survival, but a place of learning, growth, and reflection. The world was vast, full of possibilities, and shaped by the choices people made, the choices to trust, to care, and to act with integrity. And Tay, strengthened by all he had learned, felt ready to face whatever the future held, carrying with him the lessons, love, and guidance that would remain with him forever. As night fell and the stars blinked to life once more, Tay and Samuel sat together, quiet and content. The bond they had nurtured had endured challenges, grown stronger through understanding, and become a lasting connection that would guide Tay for the rest of his life. And in that quiet desert, under the infinite sky, the boy who had once felt lonely and uncertain now felt whole, confident, and ready to embrace the world with an open heart.